At a risk of showing my age, I still remember growing up in a world where there were basically two ways to buy something. Either you went to a physical shop or you bought from a mail order catalogue. Now, there's not only online and mobile commerce, but other channels like chat, and sellers are starting to interact with their customers in new ways. And more people are becoming sellers themselves, whether they are handcrafting something and selling it on Etsy or producing content like video and books and then monetizing those. We're definitely seeing the rise of alternative commerce, but how should merchants respond to this to make sure they're not missing out? Let's find out in this episode of Navigating Digital Payments.
Welcome to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline, bringing you the latest innovations, trends, and predictions about the future of payments.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Navigating Digital Payments podcast. I'm David Daly. I look after the Discovery Hub here at Worldline, and today I'm really excited to be joined by someone who was actually one of the first people who introduced me to this concept of alternative commerce. Her name is Ji Shui. She's working on product strategy in the merchant services part of the Worldline business, and she's also a member of the Worldline Discovery Hub. Ji, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, David. Thanks. It's great to be here.
So as I said, Ji, great to have you joining us. Now, in the Discovery Hub, you were one of the main people researching and looking at this topic of alternative commerce. And you're also one of the people writing the chapter in the Navigating Digital Payments report about this subject. So I think it's going to be really interesting to hear from you exactly what alternative commerce is, how it's going to impact merchants, and also what merchants need to be doing now to be ready for this change and to take advantage of it. But first, maybe I can ask you, when did you first notice this trend and what made it interesting for you to look at this further?
Yeah, sure. So I remember it was probably a few years ago. I was looking for a dress for a friend's wedding, and I went out shopping in Amsterdam where I was living, and I accidentally discovered a shop called, if my memory was correct, Lena Fashion Library. And the shop was very special. It's nothing like I've ever seen before in two ways. So first of all, they don't sell new clothes. Everything that you see there, they're like vintage and pre-owned items. And second of all, you also don't buy and own the clothes, but instead you would pay a monthly subscription at the shop, and of which you get certain number of points, and then you will use the points to select the clothes that you would like to take with you, and then after a week or so, then you return back to the shop. And it was really mind-blowing concept for me. Like, it was the first time that I saw like second-hand selling can also become so innovative. And I see that the shop was also very popular. There's a lot of customers there. So that was, I think, my first encounter with these very different ways of shopping. And I felt great because most of the time you just buy something and then you never wear it again. But that day I feel like actually also make a meaningful decision as well to the environment. And I think there was a trigger point when I started then to look at more and more of like how is the secondhand kind of revolution, or the secondhand way of living, living more sustainably in Europe, and then starting to look out trends also in other parts of the world, and starting from there. I think that gradually led to our research on the e-commerce topic.
That's really interesting. So you had this experience with a shop, very personal experience. You were looking for a dress, and
Absolutely.
I guess you noticed two differences. One, all second-hand goods, no new goods, and also this subscription model. And then also for you, it was a way to be more environmentally friendly, more sustainable in how you access that type of goods. It's really interesting, Ji. So perhaps now you could, if that was your trigger and that kind of started you on this journey of uncovering alternative commerce, could you describe maybe in simple terms for our listeners what you really mean by alternative commerce?
Yeah, sure. Alternative commerce can mean something that is really broad, but what essentially we try to communicate is commerce essentially is a new wave of what we call non-traditional commerce models that is driven by shift that we see in consumer behavior. So what we mean by that is, before we all have the assumption that consumers always buy new products, right? They also buy in order to consume, to use it, and they also buy product in order to own it, so ownership. But what we've seen in recent years, and especially more and more among the younger generation of consumers, like the Gen Z consumers, we're seeing very different consumer behavior. I think 80% of Gen Z consumers are buying secondhand products today. And many of them also believe that consumption is also a way of expressing themselves. So they also, want to hope to through the products that they buy, the choices they make to also, voice their own identity to the world. And last but not least is many consumers today also view experiences more important than owning items. So a lot of these different ways and different attitude when it comes to buying, owning products and consuming them, they are leading to this new wave of behavior in shopping, in buying, and we call this in general, alternative commerce. And we believe that our commerce is creating a new economy with three things. One is new ways to transact, new types of sellers, and lastly is innovative new business models.
That's a really clear explanation, and it's a topic as well. This idea of do people really want to own things that we discussed on a previous episode with Johan Mas, and also some of the things you spoke about there reminded of me that we also had an episode with Decathlon talking about how they were experimenting with both subscription and second-hand models and seeing some success with that. So it's as you say, it's a very broad topic. I'm interested to know, Jiv, are there some interesting specific examples of alt commerce that you've seen?
There are many. And you already mentioned companies like fashion or sports goods. They are some of the pioneers now today also in alternative commerce, especially on looking for new business models of selling their products, and also inviting consumers to join the secondhand, what they call the secondhand or resale revolution. So we're seeing some really great examples of companies like Decathlon, like David already mentioned, even in more luxury sector like Isabel Marant, like a French luxury retailer. Many of these retailers are now offering consumers the chance to also trade in the products that they previously have bought from them, and then in order to resell it on their platform to other consumers that are looking for either for style or looking for more sustainable or affordable choices. So that's certainly a big trend that we see. On the other hand of the spectrum is that there are also consumers that are renting items from other consumers. And again, examples like fashion, there is a company, I believe it's a UK startup called Buy Rotation. So they are offering a peer-to-peer rental platform where I can, for example, just rent a piece of suit from David's closet if you allow me to, so that I can actually make my closet recyclable or tradable to other consumers who are looking for items for temporary use and also make some money out of it. And this is very interesting as well because, we're seeing this kind of two dynamics of both from business to consumers, but also from consumers to consumers. So there's a lot now that we are seeing driven by the sustainable way of living. And the other good example that came to mind is obviously, when you think about buying, reselling secondhand products, there's a lot of complexities if you are a retailer, a merchant that is in a business. Especially, how do you handle the logistics? How do you, check if the product match the description, etc., etc. And also, how do you also handle the payments and shipping, etc. It's a very, very complex operations. What we also seeing also quite interesting is companies that are now providing technical solutions for retailers that are, looking into this resale revolution. So there's a company that is called ThredUp. They offer resale as a service. And how they work is that resellers can outsource their entire operations to ThredUp, and then they can help launch a resale shop for the merchants in as short as, I believe, 30 days. That's what they say on the website. And on top of that, you also see companies that are powering also the technology platform, for companies like I mentioned earlier, Isabel Mahon, and a lot of fashion retailers or luxury retailers, when they look for, launching like a second life or second-hand section on their website, they also look out now for innovative companies that can help them to make the products live. So there's a lot of companies now offering these kind of innovative solutions as well, which I find very, very interesting.
So there were 3 parts to your answer there, G. So I think firstly, you spoke about brands offering buyback. Secondly, this kind of peer-to-peer second-hand selling and buying. And thirdly, companies appearing to help retailers service this kind of second-hand resale market needs. I've got a couple of questions just on the first 2 really. So on the buyback, I think you maybe showed me an example once of some retailers where they actually give a guaranteed buyback price at the point of sale for a new product.
That's great you mentioned that. So this is another trend that we see, that companies are now also, looking into innovative ways how they can use consumers' willingness or educate them earlier in the buying journey about second-hand purchase. So, for example, there are companies who offer what is called a resale at checkout solution, which essentially, for example, when I buy a new pair of sneakers, I'm browsing on the website, and when I'm about to pay or add it to the cart, I also see the option of asking me if I want to resell it later if I want to. So what it does is that, imagine if I'm a consumer, I'm considering, to buy this new pair of shoe, but if I know that in the future or in 3 months, maybe when I decide to get a different one, or for whatever reason, I can easily then also resell it on the marketplace. For the business side, it is interesting because you can imagine that it will increase the conversion at that point for a customer. If a customer knows that, in the future, if I don't need this product anymore, I can easily resell it back to the business or to other customers with as easy as a click. And for consumers, it's also very interesting because, when I'm buying this product, if I know that later I can resell it to other consumers, it also makes me feel that I'm making also a responsible purchase decisions.
And from what you're saying there, G, it also strikes me that the future here is that it becomes more and more integrated in the listing of an item and in the sale of an item. And what I mean by that is that you go to buy some shoes and you have maybe the option to buy it new, but you also have shown to you options for buying it secondhand. You have an option for it to be bought back in the future at a certain price. You might have also an option to rent it or access it via a subscription model, but all presented at the same place for you so that you can make the choice that's best for you for that particular item.
Yeah. So imagine maybe, and I know it's already happening if you go to some marketplace platforms that they offer you the option, what you are looking for, this product is available. Yeah, there's also secondhand options available. And totally, you can imagine in the near future, maybe when a consumer go to a product listing page, they are offering 6, or 8, 7 different ways of getting the product, being first hand, second hand, being buying one off, paying in subscriptions, or renting, getting from other consumers. There's a whole way of new ways of consuming and getting and using the products. Totally.
And the other example you mentioned was this sort of peer-to-peer selling and buying of goods. Do you have any views, G, on... So to me, it's kind of obvious why you might choose to buy secondhand from a known retailer or a known brand, because it's the trust they bring. You kind of, if you... Again, going back to the Decathlon example, you trust that they know how to service a bike and make sure it's roadworthy before you rent or buy it from them. What are the benefits in the sort of peer-to-peer approach in your view?
The brand perspective, indeed, like you say, it reinforces the trust. And especially, I would say, for high-value goods, especially if you look at luxury, in the luxury sector, or, for example, if it's electronics, you want somebody that's telling you that, hey, this product is solid, it is say as it is. So the brand can, in this way, establish a lot of consumer confidence. But the peer-to-peer part, I think it opens up a different dynamics of the discussion in the sense that I think there, if you look at platforms like Vinted or even like eBay, which have been around for a very long time, consumers also go there. They might not yet already have something particular in mind that they want to buy it. So they go there also more on the discovery mode. So if you look at it from a consumer psychology kind of perspective, is I think it's a first, and like like you go to a bazaar, you come across something that's totally unexpected, and it's that fun of discovery that we are now seeing, especially that the increasing popularity of vintage goods. But on the other hand, it's also that the social aspect as well. And a lot of these, the peer-to-peer platforms, whether it is buying or renting products, their success built in the key that there's a huge traffic of consumers that are on the platform. So you kind of have that built-in supply and built-in demand. So, and the more of that, the more consumers are using the platform, either offering the product to sell or consumers that are looking to buy the products, they kind of reinforces each other and make it even more powerful. So I think that these are two kind of different angles, and we see there are very successful companies in both categories. It's difficult to say that one model might in the future be dominant than the other. I think it really depends on the type of products that we're looking at and also what consumers find important as well, in this decision making.
And that's a really good point, G, because when I look back at things I have sold on eBay, some of them I would definitely have known a shop. So I'm thinking camera lenses. There are definitely shops and dedicated websites where you can buy and sell used camera lenses. So I would know where to go for that. But quite often I'm selling a very small item, quite niche, and I would not have any idea which store in the town centre or which dedicated online retailer would want to buy that back from me. And for that, eBay is just incredible. Almost anything you can put on eBay and you will be able to find someone who is interested in buying it. So I guess, as you say, it targets a different need, whereas maybe the high value luxury goods where you need to know that it's authentic and that it's in good condition, that's where the trust of a brand or a major retailer comes more into play. I'm also interested, G, do you see regional variations? So you've given a few examples there, but are there some sort of alt commerce trends that are really hot in one country but are not seeing so much traction elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we see different trends in different regions. And so, for example, we talked a lot about secondhand revolution, reselling, sustainability in our conversation. And we see this is getting very popular these days in Europe. While you look at emerging markets like APAC, China, for example, which is also a huge e-commerce country, the secondhand economy there is not yet as, I would say, on the fast developing kind of trend as it is here in Europe. And another actually a trend that in our commerce that we haven't touched upon in our conversation is in social buying. And this is something that we see very popular in emerging economies like China, like Indonesia, and less so in developed markets like Europe and US. And this is where we see, consumers are, they treat online shopping almost like, a social party. They group together with their friends to buy products in order to get discount. There's a lot of interesting gamification elements there. So imagine, I can convince 10 of my friends together to buy this new, let's say, TV set, and then if 10 of us place the purchase together, we get a discount of 5%, and which is very interesting. We see some very successful e-commerce platforms in China, for example, like Pinduoduo is very famous for its social buying, and others as well. And which is, on the other hand, we see markets like US and Europe is less embraced so far.
That's really interesting. And I thought of that group buying trend when I was ordering a Domino's pizza, and in the app it did have the option to convert it to a group purchase. I didn't actually use it though, so I don't know. I don't know what it does, but I thought, okay, that's maybe we're seeing the starting signs of it entering, coming out of China and APAC. And also what you mentioned there, the idea that, of course, for the consumer, the benefit for them is they can potentially get a discount if they do a group purchase. For the merchant, of course, fundamentally, it reduces the cost of acquiring a customer, doesn't it? So yes, they're offering a discount, but actually they're getting more sales generated. So in a moment, G, I'd really like to get your views, your thoughts on what the impact of all of this is for existing merchants and how they need to respond. But before we come on to that, I just want to remind people that if they want to get in contact with us, let us know topics you'd like us to discuss, give us any feedback, then you can email in by writing to ndp-podcast@worldline.com. And also just to remind people to take a few moments to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and a review. So, G, let's imagine that I'm a fairly traditional merchant selling new goods in my shop, and probably also online these days. What would you say the threats would be of alternative commerce for me?
Well, first of all, David, what kind of products are you selling?
Okay, that's a good question. So, well, since I mentioned camera lenses earlier, let's say that I sell digital cameras, camera lenses, as I say, all new products in my shop.
The reason why I ask this question is it's important to know that our commerce does not affect all sectors in the same way. And if you are a business that's in fashion, especially fast fashion, and also in certain sectors, I would say like electronic goods and homeware, our commerce may be more relevant to you than a merchant that's selling fresh vegetables. And in the example that you just gave, if I as a consumer have choices between two merchants, one is David Yu, who is selling cameras online, in the store, like what you have done in the past 10 years. On the other hand, there is another, let's say merchant B, who's offering me 6 different options. Let's say, I can buy the camera as new, I can rent it, or I can rent it and then decide later if I want to buy it, or I can buy it from other consumer who don't need it anymore and have resold it on their platform, or I can send a link to my friends and the 5 friends that I know that are looking for as well for a camera for New Year party, and all of us can get a discount. Which one would I go for?
You'd be going for merchant B, and then I would lose the business. Yeah. I think is how it sounds, G.
So what I try to say here is that as a merchant, it's important to know what your customers are looking for these days, and pay attention if in your consumer demographics you have younger consumers as well, who that today probably they are all looking for more sustainable way of buying and consuming products, and merchants who are able to exhibit that in the communication, in the actual ways of selling the products, are more likely to get this consumer. So,
It's really interesting. So as you highlight there that it depends on the types of products you're selling. It also depends on the types of consumers you have, their habits, their attitudes. Although I wonder, because you mentioned, say, groceries, and I thought, obviously secondhand probably doesn't apply to groceries, but you could still imagine subscription models or acting as a marketplace so that local growers can sell their goods in your store. So I still think parts of it might still be applicable, even if other parts of alt commerce are not applicable in some cases. So you've set out really clearly there, G, I think, that if you're a traditional merchant working in a very traditional way and other merchants are offering more options that enter this kind of alt commerce space, then you're probably going to have to do something to react to that in order to stay competitive and to keep your customers happy. Before we finish off, I did really want to get your thoughts or your ideas about any predictions you might have for what is happening in this space that might take people by surprise.
That's a great question. I mean, we're still quite, in my opinion, an early wave of alt commerce. We're likely to see continuing happening. I'm sure in the next few years, the second-hand revolution will continue to grow. We're going to see more and more companies, offering the options for the customers to either resell their products or, to buy buy secondhand products. But you asked what would be something that is unexpected. I think it might be worthwhile to think about and ask ourselves this question, whether this whole secondhand revolution might fundamentally also change the way companies are thinking about what products they build. If a company make the choices to offer the consumer to subscribe and rent a product instead of owning them, they might make the decision to also build the product in a way that it can be consumed for a longer period of time. So we might see, companies making different decisions, when it comes to deciding how products are being built.
So if I summarize what you've said there, Ji, the first prediction you're making is that this growth in alt-commerce will continue. And I wonder even if one day it will just become the norm, the expected way of doing things. And I think back to the example of the phone, where once upon a time mobile phones didn't have a camera, and then suddenly some phones differentiated themselves as having a camera, and you might choose a phone because it had a camera. Of course, eventually then all phones had cameras, and so it was no longer a differentiating feature. It was more a hygiene factor. You had to have a camera on your phone, otherwise no one would buy it. And I wonder if we'll head that way with alt-commerce. At the moment it's kind of a value add, it's something special, but maybe we'll reach the stage where actually this is just a hygiene factor and it's expected. And if a merchant doesn't provide these options, it would be the same as now not providing, say, an online store or a mobile commerce option. And then I think also you make a really good point about the manufacturing of goods, that maybe this trend is starting a little bit at the consumer side, but over time that change in consumption habits will impact the economics, I suppose, of how you build goods. Because actually if more of the market moves towards secondhand and rental, then it makes more sense to build things that might be a little bit more expensive to produce, but that have a longer lifespan and are easier to repair. So I think, again, that could be a very interesting impact that we see coming out of this. On that topic of product design, so have you actually seen examples where the approach to manufacturing a product has changed to accommodate these new selling models?
Yeah, absolutely. So one company that came to mind, you probably know, is a sports shoe company called On. So they have a competitive sportwear company, and they release a sneaker that consumer can only buy on subscription, and they build a sneaker with sustainable material, and I believe each subscription will last for 6 months to a year, and then when the subscription ends, the consumer will offer a new pair of shoes. But because the shoes are built with totally sustainable material, then you know that when you get a new pair of shoe, the old shoe didn't come into create environmental garbage, but everything is recycled because they use totally sustainable material. You can imagine other products might use this kind of similar way of thinking when they are being manufactured and being offered to the market.
Ji, we've mentioned alt-commerce a few times before on the podcast, but we've never had chance to really deep dive into it with a true expert like this. So it's been a real pleasure to have you joining the podcast and sharing all of these insights. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, David, and it's great to be here.
And that just leaves me lastly to thank, of course, our dear listeners for joining us once again for this episode of Navigating Digital Payments.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline. Join us next time to learn more about the latest innovations, trends, and predictions for the future of payments.